Bitcoin is like the reason why I'm working on Nostr in some sense. Bitcoin has really opened me to like this new way of thinking in terms of like free software and freedom software, things that are even possible. If Bitcoin didn't exist, I probably would just be at a fiat job and depressed and just like slugging away. And I don't know. So it really gave me a new perspective on life and on what I should be spending my time on. Because all of a sudden we have this like very unique opportunity to experience a once in a lifetime opportunity of asymmetric value and just being able to be a part of that. It completely changed my life. In some sense, I always want Bitcoin to be a part of everything I'm working on because it just makes so much sense because it's the most important technology that humanity has ever created. So it's a big part of everything I still do, but I see it as more like a tool now that let's get this integrated into other things.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. The Bitcoin time chain is 874147, and the value of 1 Bitcoin is still 1 Bitcoin. Today's episode is Nostr Talk, where I talk with my guest about Nostr and whatever else comes up. Today, that guest is jb55, aka Will Casarin, aka Wild Bill. Will is the developer behind Damus, an iOS client for Nostr, which is also the first Nostr client I ever used. Today we dig into what's new with Damus and Nostr more broadly, Will's latest project Notedeck, open source development on Nostr and Bitcoin, why content creators and everyone else should try Nostr, and a whole lot more. Before we dive in, do me a favor and subscribe to the Bitcoin Podcast wherever you're watching or listening, but I personally recommend you listen on fountain.fm because not only can you send Bitcoin to your favorite podcasters to give value for value, but you can earn Bitcoin just for listening to podcasts. Check out bitcoinpodcast.net for episodes and additional resources. Head to the show notes to grab discount links for my sponsor Bitbox, or go directly to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker. Send an email to hello@bitcoinpodcast.net if you have feedback or if you're interested in sponsoring the Bitcoin Podcast. And if you find this show valuable, consider giving value back by giving it a zap on Nostr or a boost on Fountain. I truly appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get into this Nostr Talk with Will Casarin. Okay, we are live. Wild Bill Casarin. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one who calls you that, but I still
My
like
mom
it
calls
as
me that.
Does she? I don't know if I believe you.
But no, she does.
That. Does she really?
Well, I mean, that's what my parents called me growing up was Bill, and then I just switched to my birth name, which is William, when I moved to Vancouver.
If I'm not mistaken, your like developer name on Apple, is it still Bill?
Yeah, it was Billy. Because that was like what my parents called me, Billy, like Billy Casarin or something. Like, oh boy.
You kind of sound like a gunslinger, you know, like Billy Casarin out there.
Well, my middle name's Robert, so it's like my cousins called me Billy Bob. So I don't know. So if you call me that, I'll hate you. But
and what's your mother's maiden name, by the way, in the street you grew up on? Just for my own curiosity, you know. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. All right, we are good to go.
Sweet.
Well, it's been a while. It's been actually over 1 year since you came on this show. You were one of the first people who I did as like an actual interview, as opposed to me just rattling off news stuff or reading Austrian economics out loud. And you were one of the first. It was like end of November 2023. So yeah, it's been over a year now since you've come on. It feels like it's been too long.
I don't remember doing that.
I mean,
so many things have happened.
We were drinking during that episode.
That explains it.
Yeah. I think you, if I remember correctly, clearly I wasn't drinking enough, but I believe you were having whiskey or something a little bit stronger, perhaps.
Old fashions, probably. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that may have been the culprit.
That's what all my best work is, on old fashions.
Do you drink old fashions while you code?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have to does the number of old fashions consumed while coding, is there a direct correlation to amount of review you need to do afterwards?
Well, the biggest thing is it works into a point and then it's just downhill. It's like, this is called the Balmer's Peak, which is completely true. If you Google that, it's completely true. But I always find that
Balmer's Peak?
Balmer's Peak. It was named after the guy from Microsoft. There's an XKCD on it. So basically the theory is, you have optimal performance until a certain number of drinks, and then you just go off a cliff.
I mean, that sounds like me, and I'm not even like doing cool cypherpunk coding shit, and like my optimal performance just like having a conversation. It like I think I'm getting better at it, you know, and like especially if I'm like debating something, I'm like, I sound so fucking smart. And then after a little while, it's like, no, dude, this isn't good. Okay, so here it is.
Yeah.
Programming skill, blood alcohol concentration. Okay.
There's a small section where it's like you're just like on a roll, and then it's just downhill.
Yeah. I
always
suppose like most things in life, perhaps.
I always like to say that like it gets you to do something you would think is like crazy. Maybe that applies in other situations as well with alcohol. But like, for instance, one example I gave was, I was like, I got really drunk one night, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to build a WebAssembly interpreter. So WebAssembly is like this programming language that runs on the browser. It's like it's a virtual machine. It's very complicated, and it's like no one in the right mind would build an interpreter. But like, I got drunk enough. I'm like, let's fucking do it, and then I actually did it. Like, I actually finished it, but I needed that little kick to get it started, because otherwise it would be like, who would do that, right?
You needed to like grease the wheels a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there an old fashioned in that mug right now?
No comment.
Okay,
it's too early for that, Walker.
I know.
Come on.
I know. I was gonna try and like take a little sobriety break, because I've been, as I mentioned prior to this, I've been in Europe on some fiat mining work for the past few weeks, and a lot of that work involves also drinking, like a lot.
Yes.
For socialization reasons, all business naturally. But yeah, my body is kind of just like hurting right now, and it's like, please stop. You know, like I don't want any more of this poison, because like we can all agree, like alcohol it is in fact poison. Like yes,
yeah,
but what sweet poison it is, you know? Whew. Sweet, delicious poison.
After like my body is screaming at me every time, like, you got to stop. This is bad for you. I'm like, I know, 100% agree, and I'm like off it for a week, and then, you know, it comes back. I know, I'm probably an alcoholic. Whatever, I'll admit it. That's the definition of alcoholism.
Well, I heard an alternate definition once that was like, you're not an alcoholic unless your life sucks. And so it's like, oh, okay. But I don't know if that's actually a very good definition, because it's like, that's a pretty slippery slope, I think. But yeah. And I agree, OXTR, it is fun poison. But yeah. Moral of the story, I'm not drinking yet either. It's noon where I am, and so I figured, although it may be 5 o'clock somewhere, and my internal clock says it's like time for a drink right now, because I'm on socialist European time. I'm not quite there yet. So water for now. But
I would say, like, if it's past 12, it's usually fine. I don't know if that's
my dad would always say jokingly, but also not jokingly, well, you can't drink all day unless you start in the morning. And I was like, oh, that's, I mean, that's
can't argue with that.
Objectively
really.
True. Yeah, no, that is a fact. Derek says they call this being a functional alcoholic.
Right.
I think that's probably a fair characterization.
I'll go with that then.
Yeah. Thanks, Derek. We needed that. But yeah, so this is first episode back. It's been a little Titcoin hiatus for me. And so what better way to get back in the swing of things than with Wild Billy Casarin? It's you've been doing some work lately too. I mean, maybe, you know, a decent place for us to just kind of start out and get things going a little bit. So it's been like a year since we last talked. Since then, I think pace of development in Nostr broadly is pretty wild. Pace of development for Damus and what you guys have been building out has similarly been pretty rapid. I know you're working on a number of things right now that probably are not immediately evident to the normal Damus iOS user, because it's kind of stuff in the background, but maybe kind of just for people who are maybe newer to Nostr or have not, not been really closely paying attention. What's kind of changed for you guys at Damus in the past year since we last spoke?
Yeah, the biggest thing for us was like that, the big shock with Apple when they said we can't use apps. That was a huge turning point for Damus, because we're like, well, we want to do more Zap stuff. Like, I feel like we were just beginning with this idea of being able to zap things. We wanted Zap razors. We wanted to do like the Geyser Fund style things. But the minute they banned the ability for us to zap a post, and we're severely limited with our entire roadmap for the next year, right? So we kind of went right back to the drawing board. Like, what do we do to fix this? We could try to fight them and like risk getting get banned again, but we decided to just like, well, we need an Android client anyway. And I wanted to take everything I learned from building Damus iOS and just build a better client. So I decided to build like a multi-platform client. And it just made a lot of sense from our perspective because, I don't have money to fund like an Android team and an iOS team and a Windows team. So I decided just to build one client that works everywhere and that's like super solid. So I spent a year kind of building up the technology to do that. So I had to create a new database from scratch, a new relay, an embedded relay. But this is all starting to come together now with the Notedeck alpha release, which is the first kind of demo of us making it like a multi-platform client.
I want to dig into that a lot because I've got that now. I just downloaded it today, actually, and I'm running it here on my Mac. Maybe before we dive into that, because I think there's a lot to get into just around Notedeck and kind of how you see that as the next evolution of what you guys are doing. But for those that aren't aware, maybe can you talk about the whole iOS App Store debacle and that? Because it was like, I remember this time and it was like, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Like we were all so stoked on Zaps. Zaps were flying everywhere. And then Apple was just kind of like, don't know about that. So can you talk through that history a little bit? Because again, it feels like ages ago, but it's like, it hasn't been very long ago at all. Like it's still pretty fresh.
No, yeah, it all happened when it was actually during your Zapadvertising talk.
Oh, geez.
You were like, oh, let's do Zapadvertising is going to be the future of advertising. I'm like, oh, this is cool. I'm like, let's support this directly. So I added the top Zaps feature, and this is way before Primal did the top Zaps, right? This was showing the Zaps in top of the feed. And then I guess that kind of I assume that's what got the attention of Apple because I couldn't think of any other thing that would trigger an off review. So this is a very rare thing where they will review your app outside of normal app review. So someone was tipped off with an Apple and they're like, oh, they can't be doing this. Like this is going to cut into a revenue. That's like, I don't know. This is my theory. I have no idea. I never heard the full internal story. So yeah, and they just messaged me like, yeah, we're going to remove your app from the App Store in 7 days. So I had this huge, so basically, and at that point, like Jack is like messaging Tim Apple on Twitter. He's like, what's going on? Like all this media attention. I always say like it's probably the best thing that ever happened to Damus because every time I talk to anyone who's ever even heard of Damus, that's what they'll always reference was that one event. So it was actually good PR for us. It just kind of sucks that it kind of ruined our business model. Because our business model, our plan was, you have a feature within Damus where you just you can tip a proportion of Zaps. So let's say 10, 20% of Zaps or whatever percent you want is like a voluntary way to donate. So the idea was we're just going to grow the Zap economy and eventually we can kind of just take a cut and like that could like fund all the client development. And yeah, so they basically screwed us over with that. And they said, no, you have to remove it from the app. They allowed us to keep it on the profile so you can Zap profiles, but that's just not as fun, I don't think. So yeah, and then so we removed it. And then there's been lots of other clients since then who are allowed to have Zaps in their app or are not allowed to have Zaps for some reason. And I've talked to Milian, I've talked to some other people, and I'm like, how did you get it? Why they don't bug you? They're like, I don't know, they never bug me about it. So it's like they're not applying the rules evenly. So kind of we got kind of singled out and punished just to send a message, I guess, because we were one of the biggest ones at the time. So yeah, it just shows that I was like, I don't want to be under that boot of Apple my entire life. Like let's start building something where I don't have to like sweat bullets whether I'm gonna exist tomorrow or not, right?
No, now I feel a little guilty if it was in fact the Zapadvertising.
I don't know
talk
for sure.
Carl and
I don't know for sure. God. I have to thank you though. That was a huge thing once Apple banned us. But
well, it is kind of amazing that like that Streisand effect that happens. It's like when I guess that's not directly a Streisand effect, but basically like, hey, we're going to have some punitive measures that we put out towards this particular application, and then people start to wonder like, well, why? Like, what are they doing over there? What's maybe something cool is happening that I don't even know about yet? Did you see, even with them removing Zaps, did you see downloads increase after that just because of the kind of all the talk or all the chatter around it?
Yeah, like once that happened, like we got a huge boost into downloads, and just from all the media attention. So yeah, and then eventually it kind of died down again, but that was a huge thing.
Was that around, I'm trying to think, just timeline-wise, was that around the same time that China pulled you guys off the Apple App Store in China? Or was that just before?
If I'm trying, one was Prague. It must have been like a little bit after because I remember.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because it must have been like the next year or maybe I don't know. But yeah, China was, I was surprised how fast China banned Damus. Like it was within the first couple of days. So
Yeah, I saw somebody. Sorry, this just made me think. I just saw, maybe it was you that posted this just a little while ago. Something about like China will now like allow OnlyFans.
yeah,
but it's like so social media, no, but like OnlyFans, like, all right, okay, come on in. Yeah,
maybe they
I don't know.
Maybe they want to use it as like a blackmailing opportunity. If they collect all the data and like they use it to blackmail their enemies, right? Think about it.
Yeah, because I guess that's the thing. Your client Damus, and then also basically, I mean, any of the Nostr clients I've downloaded, it's like the best part about it is when you go into the App Store and you look at the data collection part, and it's like no data collected, like nothing.
Yeah.
And that probably for China, they're like, we don't like that.
That's not useful.
No. So yeah, we're gonna kick you guys right off.
And end encrypted DMs, like they can't look at the messages. So
it's literally all the things that they hate, like no data collection, end-to-end encryption. Like, shut it down right now. Get it out of here.
Yeah, even if they came to me and it's like, oh, we want to see the DMs that people are, I'd be like, well, I don't have them. They're all on the devices, right? I'd have to like code something special, and I'm not going to do that just for China.
Like the DMs are literally in the computer in this case. Like they are in the computer. Man, I don't know. It's wild. It's, again, I know you've been much deeper in the trenches than I have. I've been in the superficial trenches of meme warfare, but you've been in the trenches of actual writing code warfare. And I don't know, do you have this feeling that like, does time move differently? Like, you've been in Bitcoin for a while, so you obviously have that feeling of the strangeness of time. But in terms of Nostr, is it similar? Do you feel that like your perception of how time is moving is even more warped because you are literally building one of the biggest clients in the space? You're in this, living and breathing it every day.
Yeah, it's like, I call it the Nostr like time dilation field. I mean, maybe when you're in the thick of something and things are happening day to day and you're just trying to put out fires. The one thing that always sticks out to me is when I say I'm going to do something, and then I look, I every now and then I'll find that note again. It'll say 7 months ago that I said I'm going to do this tomorrow. I'm like, I literally felt like I just said that yesterday, but there's so many things going on, I just haven't got to it yet. I'm like, that is scary. When I thought something was just happening and I see a note that says 7 months ago, I'm like, holy shit. There's so much going on.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of things going on, so one of the things that you had talked about it, I think it was like 7 months ago or so, around Notedeck. Like, you had kind of floated this up. I think you'd been thinking about it for a while before then, but now there is an alpha that is available for people to download, damus.io/Notedeck, right?
Yep. And we're going to release it to the general public soon. It was because we have this Damus Purple membership, and the whole point of it is like you get access to stuff early. So Purple members have been trying it out and testing it, but for everyone else, we're probably going to release it pretty soon for the general public.
And it's pretty sweet. I kind of want to we can share screen here and bring it up, but maybe
Sure.
just first, was the issue with Apple and the kind of the reliance on Apple one of the main drivers behind you wanting to push this forward? Was it something you would have just done anyway, but maybe that gave you a little bit more of like a fire to be like, okay, I need this to be out there?
Yeah, because I could have completely imagined a scenario where, Damus's iOS is growing, a lot of users are happy, I just keep adding more and more features, but at the end of the day, I could have completely done that, and I was on that path. But when Apple said, like, the minute I have a real big problem with authority, and when someone tells me like I can't do something, I'm like, well, fuck you. I'm gonna watch me, motherfuckers. I'm gonna go do whatever the hell I want. So it was definitely probably that was the moment where it's so ingrained in me, this not like being under the control or of someone, especially when it's completely ridiculous and it's like something foundational to what I believe in, that like to have free and open money that you can send freely. Like, that's why I started working on Lightning, because I want people to be able to transact freely without some person in the middle saying you can or can't do it. So the minute Apple was like, you can't do this, I'm like, well, I instantly lost interest in developing on your platform.
It's kind of nuts too, because I know obviously Apple's been now challenged in various lawsuits and whatnot, just about kind of their like monopoly, basically power over this. But it's kind of insane that if you look just between Google and between Apple, like, yeah, okay, you can do progressive web apps and things like that. But they have the complete monopoly on your pipeline to users. And you are, again, like, for anyone that hasn't ever been through that app review process, and again, yours being outside of that process, which is like insane, but the normal app review process itself is such a nightmare, both for Google and for Apple. Because first of all, you never get a human, right? If you have a problem and it's rejected, there's never a human being you can actually talk to.
No.
Maybe you've had more luck finding a human than I have with past experiences, but never a human. You may just get caught by a bot that flags something, some code change that says, "Ooh, nope, that's actually not allowed based on our latest updated rules." It's totally opaque. You don't really have any sort of recourse, and you're completely at their mercy. Like, they literally just have you bent over a barrel, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And their guidelines is not like a contract. It's it's a guideline. So if the one line in the guideline that says that you can't, basically the whole guideline that they're ruling off of is this idea that you can't sell digital content. So my argument was like, well, zapping someone is not buying something. It's like they provided something and now you're zapping it. You're not buying it. You're not getting something. It's just a tip, right? So even like they're not even really matching their guidelines. It doesn't even really make sense, but it doesn't matter because, again, it's a guideline. They can do what the hell they want. They can just make something up. So it's a complete gong show over there. And that's why some apps get through, some apps don't. That's why some reviewers like allow it, some reviewers don't. And a lot of the time, if you just keep resubmitting it, you just get through eventually. It's kind of ridiculous, actually.
If you're getting a lot of zaps on Nostr for your insightful comments, your memes, or your feed pics, you should get the majority of those sats into self-custody by going to bitbox.swiss/walker and using the promo code WALKER for 5% off the fully open source Bitcoin only BitBox02 hardware wallet. And of course, if you have sats on an exchange, get them off the exchange and into your own self-custody on your Bitbox. Bitcoin is ripping, and soon your stack will be worth a heck of a lot more in fiat value than it is today. So now is the perfect time to make sure you have your security locked down tight with Bitbox. Plus, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the BitBox02 is easy as hell to use. Whether you're brand new to Bitcoin, it's your very first time setting up a hardware wallet, so you're a little bit nervous, or you're a well-seasoned psychopath. Again, it's Bitcoin only, and it is fully open source. You can head to their GitHub and verify for yourself. No need to trust me or Bitbox. When you go to bitbox.swiss/walker and use the promo code WALKER, not only do you get 5% off a great piece of open source hardware, but you also help support this podcast. So thank you. It's insane. And again, I think that's the key is like, because it's a guideline, it's inherently arbitrary. Like it is open to whoever's, well, not whoever, it's open to their interpretation. It's the same thing with any sort of like in a non-code perspective, but like YouTube's community guidelines. Like you may not have broken any specific rule, but you kind of got close to one of them a little bit. And so they said, they flagged it and, you're guilty until proven innocent. Like and what are you going to do? Like what is little old you going to do? You little loser. Like we've got you.
Well, my whole argument was like, look, like we're planning on releasing the Zap Racer feature, which was going to allow, let's say you're like building a well in Africa. I know it's kind of like one of those examples, but it's true. Like there could be people building wells in Africa and like, and this could help them. And so you have this $1 trillion company who just is afraid that this might slightly indent their, massive $1 trillion corporation. It's like, so you're just punishing people who just want to, I don't know. It just seems so ridiculous to me.
It's insane. And like, again, they take what do they take? 30% usually of any transaction, which is like an insane amount. First of all.
And with people like increasingly transacting online, this idea that they expect to take 30% tax on every single transaction on the planet is absolutely insane to me.
Yeah, no, it's like you thought credit cards were bad. Like, whoo, Apple is. I mean, that's basically every company they get big enough, they eventually just become a bank, right? And they just want to take their little piece of the pie that they didn't really earn, and they claim that they facilitated, but they only were able to facilitate because they are the only place where you can have your app. Like it's absurd. But okay, fuck Apple. Just wanted to throw that out there. Also, fuck Google. We are equal opportunity haters here. But
Yeah.
let's talk about Notedeck a little bit. You want me to share my screen, or you want to share yours? Just because I think I visual aid for folks.
For sure.
Yeah,
But
go.
before we go to that, I just want to mention that like we're not giving up Damus iOS development. It's just that we're kind of making it more like simpler, and like the biggest thing we're focused on right now is onboarding, because if people join and they just are confused and they leave, it's not really useful. We still want to use Damus iOS as a way to like have a really nice onboarding experience, and maybe not necessarily like Zap focus. So that's kind of our goal with Damus. But again, I still want to do the cooler things, and that's what Notedeck is for.
Well, and maybe that's worth just digging into a little bit deeper, because we're going to go on a bunch of tangents here. I already know it once you and I get going here. So we'll keep the tangents rolling. But that onboarding user flow, like that was one of the things that we I say we as a Nostr collective of people who were kind of on early and really saw the potential in this, and some of us who can't code did our best to just promote it, and those of us who could code, like you, went out and actually build the stuff. But the thing that I heard so many times was, especially in those earlier days, oh yeah, I tried out, seems like a nice idea, but like it was just confusing to get started. And of course, back in those days too, people were like, oh, it's kind of, the UI is a little clunky. I think that excuse is out the window now. Like the UI across so many different Nostr clients is so clean and professional, and exactly what you have come to expect from a social media app. But I think the onboarding is still one area where talking to Vitor or talking to Miljan, everybody's kind of focusing in a different way on, okay, how do we improve that experience? How do we make it so that those first interactions they have are smooth and are stickier, that we actually keep them around? Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of view that? Like, what's your perspective on that initial user flow from Damus? How do you guys try to make that experience as smooth as possible and make sure that people, once they've actually taken the jump to create an NPub, want to actually stay with it and keep using it?
Yeah, so this is, I've been having tons of meetings about this recently, because I went to Mexico about a month ago, and we just randomly met this couple, and we were trying to onboard them, and it was like really, really brutal. Like we were trying to get the QR codes to work, and the QR code scanning wasn't working, and like all these things that they're there, but we just never put a lot of focus on them because we're too busy trying to get the app working and the basics working. But now I realize like these are actually the most important flow. I know people have been saying that in the early days, and I feel like I'm probably at fault for kind of dismissing them, or like, oh, okay, whatever, because I was already so into it and I was just trying to make it work. But now I realize like people are joining and they just feel so clunky compared to, even now it's still pretty clunky a lot of the times, especially with Damus. So yeah, the main thing I want to do is I want to make sure they have a pleasant experience. I want it when they join, they can actually see like content. And that's always been a big struggle, is that, how do you, what algorithm do you show? So I think we're going to start seeing more algorithms, at least when you first join, some onboarding algorithms. Like like right now we have a fixed list of users, which is like getting stale, and they're probably not even relevant anymore. So we need better ways to discover content. We need better ways to also pre-populate profile, like simple things like pre-populating profiles. Because right when you first join, your client doesn't know anyone. So like it doesn't even have like profiles to search for. You can't search for people, especially if you're building a pure client. Like Primal is another example of a client where they're taking a different approach, where they maintain a central relay, and they provide all that for free. But like Damus is trying to stay pure to the protocols. We want to not rely on a central server. So how do you do this in a decentralized way and still load profiles? So there's like simple things like that. It's not even that complicated. Just recommend useful things, preload profiles, get QR codes, scanners that actually work. Because because I go into like Threads or Blue Sky, it's like they have pretty good experiences. Like obviously they have teams of like 10 to 20, 30 people. So that's what we're competing with. But I think we can get there. I don't know if that'll like fix the issue. Another thing was retention. Like we noticed the retention numbers were very, very low. People are joining and leaving right away. And this is the whole, again, maybe we theorize that onboarding is a big aspect of this. So one thing we added recently was push notifications. I think we're I think us and Amethyst are one of the few clients that have push notifications. A lot of people say that, well, they're like a dark pattern, or they're not. But some people actually really, really like push notifications. If you don't get a lot of interactions on Nostr, and then you forget about the app, and then if someone randomly tags you one day and it brings you back into the app, that's actually pretty good. Like most apps do that. We're not as aggressive as Threads, where they like put up like random stuff in your notifications all the time, but it's still better than nothing. So all these things are helping, I hope.
Yeah, it's interesting with Blue Sky, because they've obviously, It's a different. I mean, it's first of all, it's a different protocol, right? And they've obviously taken a different path on that in terms of how they view. I mean, I think one of the most stark differences is moderation. Like, it becomes very clear very quickly if you say the wrong thing on there that has the right trigger words in it, you will get moderated out of existence. And that's not really the case on Nostr at all. Yeah, you can get muted by people. And you won't get interacted with, but you can keep shouting into that, what becomes a void for as long as you'd like and saying whatever you'd like. And yeah, I recently, after like over a year, just checked back in on Blue Sky just to kind of see what was happening over there. And it was about the same in terms of the discourse that was over there. The user experience was improved. They finally got hashtags to work. That took them quite a while. Apparently that was difficult on that protocol. I don't know. But yeah, they have had, and I find it interesting too. They had obviously a massive surge, amongst people who were like really, really anti-Elon, anti-Trump. We're like, we want to get away from X because it's a horrible right-wing cesspool. And they all seem to have flooded to Blue Sky. Now, for better or worse, I'm sure a lot of them also ended up trickling over to Nostr, but probably a minuscule percentage compared to the ones that went over to Blue Sky. And it's kind of interesting to think about too, like where we see kind of these waves of adoption on Nostr. Like we saw them, like Jack and Snowden kind of each had their like own wave of people that they brought over. You've seen a lot when there's censorial regimes in various countries, you see that pick up a little bit. But I'm kind of curious what you see as the next drivers of big user flows into Nostr, or do we have any more, maybe it's not big flows, maybe it's little trickles, but it just keeps picking up pace and picking up pace.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing with the Blue Sky was when people were posting their only two genders and everyone was getting banned for saying that. Basically just sums up the entire platform.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think we'll always exist, and Nostr kind of represents this space that once everyone's fed up with everything else not working, it's one of those things where it's like, it's obvious to people who are here because, and I went through this recently where it's like, I already went through this. I went and did the technical evaluation on all these things. So to me, I'm like, why isn't this obvious? Why doesn't everyone see this? But I realize it's because no one's gone through the work to figure out, because it's hard work. It's like to evaluate different protocols, to understand like how is it censorship resistant for the other versus other things. A lot of the time people join these networks just because like some influencer or some celebrity said to come follow me. And that's what we saw with Blue Sky. There's a lot of like famous people started going over to it, and then people are drawn in by them. So the sad story is like people won't get into it for the tech. I guess it's a similar story with Bitcoin. So you just need to use the tactics that they're using. So one obvious thing is just make the creator tools really, really good. Like if we make the creator tools better than other platforms, like just make it so easy to start earning sats and get easy to like view your analytics, or make it really easy to upload video and long form content. Because there's a lot of people I've talked to who want to join and they want to write long form content and produce it. But like a lot of the time, even in the Nostr clients today, that's like you have to go download some other client or so anyway. So I think creator tools will be a big thing, and making video work a bit better. I've been really adamant about let's make video really good, because media content is like all over that's what social media is about these days, is just sharing media content. So maybe if we just be better, be a better solution for those types of things, and then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, we have all these awesome tools, but also we get to own our account and own our data. That's going to be like the aha moment, maybe. But I don't know. These are all kind of theories. It's it's kind of sad. I'm just like, I was hoping maybe it'll just be obvious to people and they'll just adopt it because it's so obvious. But it's obviously going to be an uphill battle of education.
I think it's interesting because like for people who, as you said, are already kind of deep into this, deep down the Nostr rabbit hole, it's like the idea is like, well, if you build it, they will come. Like, come on, this is just better. Like, why aren't people seeing this? But you're right. The reality is that people don't come for the tech. They come for you. I mean, some people do. A lot of the people that are here already do, and are coming because they see the potential of this as a tool for censorship-resistant publishing, owning your own content, and honestly, already see the better user experience that this can provide. But most people are going to come because some influencer they like, some media personality says, hey, I'm going to be publishing this specific type of content only on Nostr, or I'm just going to start publishing it generally on Nostr, whatever. And then once they get here, they'll realize, oh, wow, this is actually a much more flexible, user-friendly experience than anything else I'm used to. Like, that's the thing. Once, even like from my perspective as a podcast creator, it's so nice for me to be able to upload something. So I mean, granted, there's a couple of jumps that I make, but for the long form videos, I upload them to satellite.earth, and then I paste that into Highlighter. I throw in the caption and everything else. I publish it to Highlighter, and then anywhere that long form video content is displayed, for example, flare.pub, it's instantly available there. I don't have to publish on flare.pub as well. It's just there. And that is already so much better than me publishing on YouTube and on Rumble and on X and Spotify does video now. So do I need to publish that on Spotify as well? Spotify is just a whole nother just garbage can silo too, because I only recently found out because I was listening to Odell on a show and he was like, yeah, any podcast metrics you see from your RSS feed don't actually include Spotify metrics because they keep all of that within Spotify. So they just pull it once from the RSS feed and then give you your own internal metrics. And it turns out oh, wow, I've got thousands and thousands more listeners than I thought that are just on Spotify, which is strange. But again, that's how they decide to do it. So whatever. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think there's this idea of people running away from something or running towards something, and running towards something is always more powerful because at the end of the day, even if people are running away from censorship, deplatforming, whatever it might be, it's always going to be more powerful if they're running toward a better user experience, a place where there's better content, a place where there's just better conversation. That's always going to be stickier than running away from something else, because you could always be running away from something else. But if you're running towards something, you actually have a destination. You're not just going off in whatever direction you think is going to satisfy, getting out of your current state of pain. But yeah. So do you want to dig into Notedeck a little bit? Because I think this is pretty sweet. Do you want to share or do you want me to? Because I've got it up here.
I can share.
Yeah.
Or you can share too, whether you want to do.
Well, no, you want to share yours because you've obviously, you'll be much better at playing around with it.
I don't even know if that'll still work though. We'll see. I'm on Linux.
If not, I can. Yeah, you should have. Yeah.
All right, does it work?
There we go. Yep. I got you.
I can blind people if they want, or I can not blind people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go dark mode for sure.
So this is Notedeck, and you might notice that it's very similar to something like TweetDeck, and that's kind of what it was inspired by. And the biggest thing is that I've kind of built this for performance. So you'll notice that you can kind of scroll. And it's getting full frames, and you can scroll basically back to the start of your entire database. So it's really optimized for performance. I'm going to stop making people hurl in a second. Another thing is it's offline first. So let me just close it real quick and open it. So it starts really quickly. So that was me closing it and opening it. So it works offline. So if you're on an airplane or something, you can still use stuff. You can reply to people. And you can add columns, and we're going to add more column features. But this is the long-term plan of this is I want to kind of become a Nostr browser, kind of like Google Chrome. And anyway, I don't know. It's still very early, but it's kind of like our tech platform that is demoing this stuff.
No, I mean I think it's sweet because I personally really enjoyed TweetDeck. It's a nice way to experience especially, I do a lot of stuff on my phone, but if I am on my laptop or whatever, I like to have that experience of, I can check out multiple things at once. I have the ability to really kind of customize and tailor my experience way more so than I can on just that single, smaller screen on the phone. I'm curious. So you mentioned it's offline. So if you're replying to stuff when you're offline, is it just storing the events and then when you get back online, it broadcast them, or how does that work?
I mean, it will work that way. This is still an alpha, but
okay,
that's the plan. Is that it'll kind of put it into an outbox or something, kind of like your mail client.
That's I mean, honestly, super slick. And yeah, again, I just started playing around with it today. I'm curious. So do you see like adding the ability to like, okay, will you be able to create a feed that's like, I just want to filter by, by video posts, or I just want to filter by image tags on here? Kind of, will you be able to have those kind of multiple experiences built in there, or do you want to keep it more to the, just generalized microblogging filtering or long form filtering?
Yeah, so this is the goal for Notedeck is it's going to be really the power tool. Like it's for the power users. It's very similar like Twitter or X Pro, they call it. It's the new TweetDeck name.
Yeah,
it's for power users. It's really meant for power users. I actually want to share one app. So this note. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, we're going to have different columns. There's going to be long form posts. You can have like you can actually have notification feeds and contact feeds from other people. So you can have multiple accounts. That's how I currently use it. I have the Damus notification feed, my personal notification feed, even Vanessa's notification feed to see if people are messaging her. And then so it's really for power users. But additionally, what I want to do is start building other apps within it, again, along the same idea as this browser idea. And I'm going to share kind of like one thing I'm working on real quick. So I don't know if you can see this, but this is a visualization of every user that's in the local database on my local machine. So what I want to do with this is imagine if people are chatting on the network and you kind of see like the profile pic shimmer, or there's like a circle around it. And let's say Vitor right here, he's talking to this person one of these people. So maybe you'll see a line between this if they start talking. So this kind of becomes this interactive virtual map of like all of the activity going on in Nostr. And because I think I really believe a big part of discoverability is just like visualizing the network. It's like a visualization problem. So just being able to see what's going on at a higher level is kind of like one additional power tool I want to build. Anyway, so I just want to demo that real quick.
No, that's super sweet, because I think again that's one of the other things that came up and continues to come up again and again is in terms of user retention on Nostr generally is discoverability. Like, okay, let's say you nailed the onboarding flow, and of course part of that onboarding flow is discoverability in a sense, but there's also the discoverability that happens when you are already onboarded, you are a user of whatever client you're using. How do I find more content that is going to resonate with me and that is going to help me engage with the network more? And I think that's something that it seems that a lot of clients are focusing on a lot right now. Like, how do we make this better? One aspect of it is like algorithmic discovery, right? Like, okay, let's build these various feeds. And that's something I want to kind of talk with you about a little bit as well. But then I really like this kind of visual map idea to kind of be able to see, okay, like what does actually the conversation flow look like? Where are the strongest connections? I don't know if that's something that can be built into, who's communicating the most? Like, what does it look like over the past, not just live, but like the past week as well? How have people been interacting? Who's interacting with who? What do those clusters look like? Like that's kind of fascinating.
And this is actually Jimmy Song's idea, surprisingly. I was talking to him in Nashville.
Really? I
think it was in Nashville. And I was like on a boat, and he's like, hey, here, let me tell you, like, this is what I want in Damus. And he like sketched it out. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I could totally do this. So yeah, if you see this feature in Damus, eventually it's because of Jimmy Song. But
that's awesome.
But there's like, what's cool about this visualization is that there's different ways you can visualize, right? So one of the common feedback we get is that when people join, it's like, oh, it's just everyone talking about Bitcoin, everyone talking about Nostr. But people who talk about those things are naturally follow each other. So imagine all the people who follow each other, they kind of cluster into a section of that virtual 2D map. So you can instantly see everyone who are Bitcoiners. You're like, oh, that's that group. And so imagine if you can circle that group and create a list, and that's your initial contact list. It's just your Bitcoiner list. But then again, there's other people who might be more interested in gardening or permaculture. And those people will naturally clump together because those people are talking to each other all the time. And that will naturally form a cluster. Like, oh, and then maybe even eventually, like, you can just apply machine learning and it'll say like, oh, these people are talking about permaculture, this group. You circle, so you instantly create lists automatically from those clusters. And then what this creates is like this 2D map. I almost call it like the Nostr village, which is funny because this is what the Japanese users called Nostr. Like right when I started interacting with Japanese users, they're like, oh, welcome to the village. This is the village, because that's what it really is. It feels like a kind of a small village with different groups of people within the village. So I think if we just visualize that and map it out, I think that could actually solve a lot of these issues.
I love that idea of kind of being able to create like these ad hoc, if you will, lists and groupings based on interest. Because again, yeah, you can also you can follow certain hashtags and do things like that right now, but sometimes you end up getting maybe more spam in there than you would want because people are obviously using those hashtags when they're not actually talking about whatever that thing might be. But this gives you a way to kind of filter that to a certain extent. Like, okay, these people are consistently talking about whatever X topic that it is. I know that this is going to be a high signal list of people who are going to continue talking about this, not just they're trying to use it to somehow get thrown into other people's, other people's feeds.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, I realize this, a lot of the apps that we currently use already kind of do this. Like a lot of the machine learning algorithms that they're using do this for you. But the cool thing about this, when you make it visual, is that it's no longer opaque. Like a big thing that people worry about is this idea of like, what is the algorithm doing? It's influencing me and trying to convince me to do or to vote a certain way. But this is like, it's open. It's an open way of like, this is exactly what the algorithm is doing because you just circled this group of people and now the algorithm is just what you just physically did on the screen. And I love this idea of an openness to algorithms where you actually can see what the algorithm is instead of just like some program telling you that is like, trust me, I'm doing the right thing, right?
I was listening to, you gave a presentation, I think it was like Nostr, I believe it was. This was like a couple weeks ago. And it was super interesting because you were talking about just a lot of the things that you've been working on that are not directly visible. It's not just the iOS app. Like it was, Note Push, this relay for push notifications, the Nostr DB, Nostr Script, Note Guard, Note Crumbs. And I'm just kind of, if there's any of those maybe that you want to get into a little bit, because I think sometimes these things are, they're easy to miss for folks because again, if they're just using Nostr casually, and maybe they don't need to know about all of these things, but I think some of them are really interesting. And one of the things maybe that would be a place to start with that was you were talking about Nostr Script versus DVM. Can you talk about that a little bit and maybe back up for a second, just explain what DVM is, and then just kind of Nostr Script alongside that?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not a DVM expert. From what I understand is that you're kind of outsourcing a lot of the algorithm work to some other entity on the network. Let's say your client or you might not know how to show the best, like the top Zap post or the top like post. So you're outsourcing that request, that algorithm to a third party. So there's some third party, they generate a list of notes for you, and then you consume that list on your client. So that is very much like a different approach from Nostr Script. So Nostr Script is kind of like the inverse of that. So Nostr Script is, instead of that other entity generating that list for you, that algorithm for you, you just have the algorithm yourself. It's actually a short computer program that's a portable binary program. And then you put that into your client, and then and your client will generate that list for you dynamically and on demand without having to spam the network with like all these lists all the time. The reason I like that approach is it works offline. So if you're like, your algo feed, and it's also private. Like you can have your own algorithms. You don't have to tell the world that what algorithms you're interested in. Because they're just programs that are running. Think of like a small JavaScript program that's running within your browser that's doing something useful. So they're related, but they just do it in a different way. So Nostr scripts are being integrated into the Nostr DB, which is another technology I was working on, which is a new type of database which is built into Notedeck. So everything you saw in Notedeck is all powered by Nostr DB. And the way to think about Nostr DB is that it's like a relay that's in the node. Like the relay is in the computer. Like a lot of the clients I built before, like on Damus iOS, it's like there's no relay in Damus OS. You just have to talk to remote relays. The downside of this is when you're not online or when you have poor connectivity, things won't load. So Notedeck's a different approach where it's like things will always load, and it's not, and the results of what you see are not dependent on what the relays are sending you. So a relay could be like injecting ads into your feed. Like let's say you request someone's profile, and instead of them giving you the profile, they just give you a bunch of ads and interspersed between the notes. Like they could totally do that. So clients have to be very careful to like make sure that the resulting query is matching the filter that they sent. But with Nostr DB, you don't have to think about that at all because you're only ever querying the local relay that's inside your client, and then you're just dumping data in from other relays around the web. And then everything just kind of works, and it works offline. So anyway, so it's a different approach. I call it the local relay model. So my vision for the future of this Nostr client is, you have your local relay. You're only ever talking to the local relay. You have these Nostr scripts that are running that only interact on the local relay. Like all these visualization tools, it's only and that makes it really fast too, because when you're loading data off, you don't have to wait for data to load off the network because it's always there, it's always available. You can always query it in the same way you would query any data on Nostr. Anyway, so I hope it leads to like a much better user experience and a much more powerful in terms of things you can. It's a technology where you can build more powerful things on top of. That's why I was thinking of it as like a Nostr browser in that sense.
No, I love that. And the other thing you mentioned, which I wanted to follow up on, was note crumbs. Can you talk about what that is?
So Note Crumbs is what powers. I mean, I worked on Note Crumbs for like a weekend last year in December, and it kind of works. So whenever you share a Damus.io link, it's called something. It's called an Open Graph server. So whenever you share that link on Twitter, or you share it in an iMessage, or you share it in a mail, Open Graph is this open protocol where like the operating system itself can pull in a preview of that post. So what you'll notice whenever you share a Damus.io link, you'll actually see an image preview in like your Messenger app or whatever. So that's what Note Crumbs is. I'm expanding Note Crumbs to become kind of like our version of Primal.net web. So one of the biggest things is being able to share your profile to like other people, and this is why people love the Primal links, because you get your username, you can share it, and then you have like a nice preview of your profile and all your recent posts. So this month I'm working on expanding Note Crumbs into like our own version of the Primal.net web links that are like fully blown profiles. But the only adjustment I'm doing is that I'm not making it a full blown web client, because I don't think web is secure to build Nostr clients. It's going to be something. It's just mainly for previewing notes and just to make sure that's really high performance and it loads quickly. That's just kind of the main goal with that.
Nice. Okay. Well, I'm curious too. Just kind of there's a lot of development happening on Nostr, both within Damus and everything you're building, within Primal, within Amethyst, within Snort, here on Zap.stream, on Iris. I can't even name all of the different clients that are out there now, so I'm not trying to purposefully exclude any. These are just the ones that popped into my head first because they're the ones that I use the most. But I'm curious, are you looking at the development that's out there for other stuff like Pablo, for instance, building out this OLAS. I believe that's how you're supposed to pronounce it. But are you looking at some of this, and do you draw some inspiration from what you see in other clients? And does that make development sometimes a little bit less daunting because a lot of this is open source? I mean, most of it, that's fair to say, right? Like most of the client development that's out there is open source. Maybe not all, but the vast majority. Yeah.
Yeah, most of it's open source, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of web clients, and I don't use any web clients, so maybe I'm weird in that sense. But one thing I'm really excited about is Kieran's working on a native version of Zapstream, built on the same technology as Notedeck. He's actually using NostrDB as well, so I'm super hyped for that, because hopefully I can integrate that Zapstream into Notedeck in the future.
That would be super, super slick. And I'm the same way. So you're not a freak. You're not alone. I honestly prefer. I do most stuff on mobile, just because that's what I like to do. I like to walk a lot, and so that's more conducive to it. Although I do have my indoor walking treadmill and my standing desk, so I can still walk and use my laptop. But I have noticed that there is a lot of focus on web clients generally. You mentioned that that's sometimes not as secure. Is that worth getting into at all, or does that get too technical for some people? I'm just kind of curious, is that something that you view as an actual vulnerability in terms of are we talking about okay, you're exposing private keys if you're not using something like an extension, or maybe at a high level, where do you see that vulnerability from a Nostr client perspective?
Well, that's the main issue, is that if you want security, you have to really compromise UX. So if you go to any Nostr client on the web these days, it's you have to use a plugin, or you have to use NSEC Bunker. So NSEC Bunker is this remote signing idea. So if you're new to Nostr and you're presented with those two options, you're like, what the hell is this? And they just leave. So you're kind of screwed if you're building a web app. That's why it's so much nicer on native, because it's relatively more secure, and you can just generate a key, and you don't have to worry about cross-site scripting attacks that are just which actually happens multiple times. It happened with Coracle. It happened with Enigma, where people, and Coracle wasn't a cross-site scripting, but there's like these analytic scripts that can like send your key off. So a lot of the web apps are just removing NSEC for good reason. They're removing the NSEC input, but now you're just like your UX is screwed. And like if we want this to succeed, you really almost need like an OAuth or password login for web apps. And I don't know how to make that work really. That makes sense. Unless you're like encrypting the key on a server somewhere, but still like you have to do post somehow. So you got to give your key to some server that's going to sign for you. It's just I don't know how to solve that.
Well, I noticed like a lot, and I think you guys do this. Like when I was downloading Notedeck, it had me put in my NPub, and then Damus sent a DM to me with a one-time code, which I then used to authenticate and download. So I never had to put my NSEC anywhere. I didn't have to use any sort of signer or anything like that. It was just that one-time code. But again, that's predicated on the fact that I have the mobile app and I'm using that and have access to it. So for a newer user, it's like, well, okay, well, where do I go check that DM? So it's I suppose chicken and egg kind of thing.
Yeah, we're probably not going to expose that to like regular people. Eventually, we probably just want it so you can sign up with like a credit card if you don't know anything about Bitcoin or. But like that, it was really Notedeck's kind of mainly for people who already have a Purple subscription right now. But eventually, it's just you won't need to log in that way.
So I mean, I know you mentioned earlier just having a focus, let's say, less on Zaps. But at the same time, I know you are like an only Zaps kind of maximalist. When you say less of a focus on Zaps, do you mean kind of for the general user? Like, do you think that that's maybe we've leaned too hard in the direction of focusing on the fact that, look, you can, because it is pretty freaking incredible. Like, look, you can send and receive Bitcoin. You have basically Venmo-like capability built into every Nostr client. You can do this seamlessly, near free payments that travel instantly around the world to anyone's NPub that you want and are sent to their wallet. Do you think that that's, again, it comes to like, we think that's really cool, but the majority of people just don't really give a shit? Is that kind of where your head's at?
Well, there's two things on this point, which is one, it's more specifically for the iOS side. We're probably going to focus less on it just because we can't do as much. Like we want to do a lot of cool things, but if you can't zap a note and if you can't do any note related zaps, it's like, well, it just practically for us, it doesn't really make sense to focus on that. Again, maybe we could have some weird setup where we, like Primal does, where you have to pay and have like a KYC wallet, but that's just going so far away from our core of pillars, our core philosophies that we don't really want to do that. So, and again, the second point, which is exactly what you're saying, a lot of users just don't care. They just want to experience Bitcoin, but they don't need to hear it like shoved down their throat. A lot of the time that just scares people away. I always want people just to experience it and not think about what it is. And then they can learn about it later if they want to dig into it. But like, I don't think like marketing it as like a Bitcoin wallet is going to be helpful for us. But, and then the third thing is, on the Notedeck and Android side, we're going to go heavy into it because we're not restricted there. Right. So we actually have, there's a local, it's probably like one of the last working NWC wallets. So it's a company here. I know the guy, Adam Soltis, he runs it. He's in Vancouver, North Van, like right across the street. So we're going to probably partner with him and just make that the default Damus wallet and just have it automatically set up an account. So very soon we're going to have it like a built-in wallet in a Damus that's powered by CoinOS. That's kind of like the next steps on the maybe we'll have that in iOS as well. It's just harder because I'm sure we'll get more scrutiny, but I think we'll try pushing again and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm curious because somebody asked about this in the Zap.stream chat as well. Just eCash generally, and a lot of the stuff that Callie has been doing and a lot of the other devs building around it. Are you guys looking at that at all? Do you think that there's a lot of flexibility there, obviously. Yes, of course, for anybody listening there, as Callie himself would tell you, there is increased rug risk. Don't keep everything on a mint, pull it out periodically, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. But that being said, are you looking at eCash at all? Are you viewing this as something that's going to be, integrated more, let's say, natively into more clients?
I think my perspective is that NWC is the interface. Like, I don't care how you set up your mint. Like as long as it's Lightning and it's compatible with Lightning, then that's fine. I'm not going to have like custom integration for Cashew just because I think the complexity or the eCash, because I think the complexity gets really high. Because the minute you have like eight different cashew nuts from different mints, and now like mints are going off like up and down all the time, and it just gets really complex. I don't know how to solve that. It's like a UX issue, right? It's like, how do you wrangle with that complexity of having all these different tokens from different mints? And it's like, they're all just like paper Bitcoin that you have to go back to redeem for like actual on-chain Lightning. I just think it adds a lot of complexity. So if I say, like, we're just kind of focusing on the NWC interface that is compatible with a lot of these mints anyway. So that's kind of what we're doing.
No, I think that's fair. And, that's the beauty of people building in and around Bitcoin, Nostr, eCash. It's like there's somebody focusing on everything, or, I should say, out of everything, somebody's focusing on each little part, and usually multiple people. And that's kind of like a beautiful thing, because interoperability and sleeker solutions may be built out by somebody who you had no idea was even building this or focusing on it. And then all of a sudden one day it's just, they ship the code and it's there for people to use. Like I think that's like kind of the incredible thing, especially if you're following a lot of Nostr devs or Lightning devs, eCash devs, whatever. All of a sudden stuff just pops up and you're like, oh wow, that's really cool. I had no idea they were even working on that, and now they've just shipped it. Like it's incredible. But to clarify, Zap devs, because they are actually doing a shitload of work behind the scenes. Another thing I heard you mention in that Nostr talk was this idea of your focus with Damus and also Notedeck and these other products that you're building out, of being kind of like a social work play dynamic. Can you talk about that a little bit? How that shapes your methodology as you're building stuff?
Yeah, so I think the gaming space is like super untapped. Because I'm a gamer. I used to build I like to build video games. I have a game engine I built in C from scratch that I still hack on occasionally. And I've always wanted to, like, what would a Nostr integration with a game look like? And so like this whole 2D landscape, like visualization, is really just the first step of like me building like this virtual shared space where, imagine if you go to someone's profile and then they have like this virtual room, and maybe there's a what do you call it, one of those talk clients. It's associated with the room, so you can jump in and hang out with people within the room, kind of like Habbo Hotel style. I don't know, I don't know what the latest ones are these days, but I always liked that idea of like building these virtual shared spaces, because I grew up, I used to play like World of Warcraft a lot, and that was literally my community, where I was like, I would hop into the game and be present with people and like chat with them, and like we would fight dragons together, and it was like such this cool like virtual experience. And like I wanted always to bring that aspect of that into Nostr somehow. So this visualization is like step one. I eventually want to have like places you can actually go and be within the Nostriverse. I don't know, I just think that's kind of cool. I forget what that was, a long train of thought, but I forgot what the question was. No,
that actually, I mean, that kind of gets in. I had people as well asking about gaming in the Zap.stream chat. And I think that's kind of interesting. Somebody was asking about Nostr gamer ID profiles, text-based Nostr games, BBS door games. I don't know what that means, actually. Excuse me if that makes me a total noob. But I think that the gaming space, I would agree, it is like incredibly kind of untapped. And I think there's multiple layers to that, right? There's the actual in-game experience layer, but then there's also like the like, let's say Twitch, that I've never used it personally, but I know that like an insane amount of people do. Like it is wildly popular, so much that they have massive conferences specifically just about Twitch streamers. Like, you have Zap.stream now. You've got actually, when I hopped on the Hive talk that you guys had last night or the night before, that was the first time I'd used Hive talk. I was actually super impressed.
It's really good.
Like who built that, by the way?
BitCarrot. I was very, I didn't know she was building this, but it's amazing. So good job. It's very impressive.
I was like kind of blown away when I thought it was just going to be an audio only, because I hadn't looked into it at all. I thought it was going to be an audio only kind of space, similar to Nostr Nest or something, but it was like you had a lot of concurrent video running from everyone, and the performance seemed to be still like top.
She says it can go up to 100.
I was blown away.
She says it can go up to 100 people. So I was like, well, that's pretty good.
All streaming video at the same time?
I assume so. That would be pretty crazy, but
I mean, that is pretty wild. But like, so I'm curious, where there's a huge number of gamers worldwide. Myself am a gamer. Carl is a gamer. You are a gamer. I know probably a lot of people listening to this are also gamers. But again, we're still here a minority on Nostr. in terms of like the Nostr verse is still fairly small. I mean, do you think that that's kind of another potential inflow of new users that we might see as people starting to build tools around, maybe it's around, gaming itself, but also around the gaming experience, the Twitch-like experience, providing those kind of tools? Like that's a huge, huge market of people. And also there tends to be, when it comes to these streaming tools like Twitch, there tends to be a value component to it, right? You tend to be able to tip people, things like that.
Exactly.
Obviously, using Bitcoin over Lightning is a much more seamless way to do that. It seems like kind of a natural marriage there, yeah?
Yeah, and a lot of the time, these platforms, like, you have to be very careful what you say. They're, like, highly moderated. So if you say the wrong thing politically, like, boom, your entire business is gone. And a lot of these streamers make tons of money. Like, they're actually so, like, they're kind of bigger than some celebrities. Like, some of these people, like XQC and Asmongold, there's, like, all of these, like, really big streamers. They make, like, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. Just from people, like, in some sense zapping them, but they're using the platform Zap, and then the platform takes a huge cut. So there's a huge opportunity here of, like, not even just the Zap stream aspect, but one example I always think about is I have my RuneScape character that I've been basically building since 2007. Like, I'm very passionate about this because I'm going to get to 99 mining eventually. I'm at 95 mining, so anyone knows about RuneScape. It's like I finally
got to play RuneScape quite a lot. So yeah.
So I still have it, but I'm like I don't actually own this character. Like if the admin of that server doesn't like me, they can ban it, and like I literally would lose 10 years of work. This has actually happened to a lot of people who are like playing games and like. So I always like this idea. I'm like, how do we apply that idea of like owning your character in cyberspace, owning your like avatar and owning the items within your avatar. Like, we're not a blockchain, so we're not like transferring items or anything like that, but there's still some interesting aspects. Like maybe the game I'm playing, they can sell me stuff and for Nostr notes. And if you think about what the badge spec is, they're really just like an item that's like someone can send you, and it's like a virtual item you can display on your profile. So maybe there's an aspect of that where you can get items from the game you're playing through Nostr. So there's that aspect, which is huge. Like, I don't that's completely unexplored. So yeah.
Well, no, and I think like, it's so funny, the whole idea of like, we'll just use the blockchain for everything, right? Like basically every shitcoin's, pitch deck is like, well, we're going to put whatever this is on the blockchain, and that's going to make it better, right? Okay, VCs, give us your money, let us pump this pre-sale token to you, and then let's dump it on retail, and we all come out rich. And nothing was ever really solved. But at the end of the day, you don't need a blockchain for like I think basically the only real use case for blockchain that we have so far is money, and that's Bitcoin. Like we're good with that. And yes, you can theorize about, tokenizing securities and all these other things on the blockchain, but like really still Bitcoin is the only valid use case that I think we have seen for blockchain to date, and a very, very good one. But for a lot of things like, various in-game assets and things like that, like that's all that really requires is like public-private key cryptography, right? Mm-hmm. Being able to sign that, okay, this asset was transferred from, X user to Y user, and now this user's private key is the only one that can sign that and transfer it elsewhere. Like that's really kind of all you need. I mean, maybe you can make the argument that you'd need specialized relays. Like you'd want a centralized relay running some of this. I don't know, just because like you'd want to have that quote global state. But I think it's really interesting, and I'd be very curious to see. I mean, do you know, is anybody working on something like this? I mean, probably somebody in the larger Nostr community is hacking on this right now, right?
I mean, we talked about, like, me and Semisol talked about like a transferable badge protocol, which it gets kind of complicated, but if you're transferring things, maybe Cashew would be perfect for that, right? Because you have this bearer token that you can transfer. You still have that centralized mint, but a lot of the time, that mint is like managing like the game assets, or it is the game company. But once they transfer to you, you can at least have like a bearer proof that like, hey, this is mine. But even if it's a simpler case where non-transferable assets, which is fine, which is like a lot of that actually works for a lot of different things. Nostr works great for that. So yeah, I don't think you necessarily, you definitely don't need a blockchain or a ledger for every, and it also doesn't really make sense to have like a completely like transparent ledger for like every game item history. Sometimes you want to recover items and delete items. Like you want to be able to do some moderation. I don't know. It really depends on the use case, but Yeah, I don't know. I think blockchain is kind of overkill for a lot of these things.
So, I mean, maybe just like switching gears slightly because it is, speaking of blockchains that are not overkill for something, and speaking of Bitcoin, I was asleep because I was in European time zone. I was asleep when Bitcoin hit 100K, and I
Nice.
woke up to like texts and voicemails from Carl, and I was like, God damn it! I missed it. Shucks, I missed it. But it's kind of a wild time right now, and I know you've been in Bitcoin much longer than I have. You've also been developing in and around Bitcoin, much longer than I was even aware that Bitcoin existed. So I'm kind of curious, just what are you at all like still kind of paying attention to Bitcoin more broadly, or is your focus just kind of deep in Nostr right now? Oh, like where are you at, or are you just kind of at the point where it's like, yeah, okay, Bitcoin's doing what Bitcoin's doing, but I'm hacking on other things now.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been, in some sense, Bitcoin is like the reason why I'm working on Nostr. In some sense, like Bitcoin had really opened me to like this new way of thinking in terms of like free software and freedom software, things that are even possible. Like if Bitcoin didn't exist, I probably would just be at a fiat job and depressed and just like slugging away. And I don't know. So it really gave me a new perspective on life and on what I should be spending my time on. Because all of a sudden we have this like very unique opportunity to experience a once in a lifetime opportunity of like asymmetric value and just being able to be a part of that. So I'm like, I don't know. It completely changed my life. And so I wouldn't say like I'm not, in some sense, I always want Bitcoin to be a part of everything I'm working on because it just makes so much sense because it's the most important technology that humanity's ever created. So I don't know. So it's a big part of everything I still do, but I see it as more like a tool now that let's get this integrated into other things.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It is such an obvious integration. Like the fact that, it should be self-evident that like the fact that Nostr has this Bitcoin Lightning integration and no one else really does, whether it's, Blue Sky or, X, technically they've had a Strike integration for a while. Like you can, you can kind of zap somebody via their profile. I don't think probably the usership of that is so insanely small.
I don't think I've ever used it.
Yeah, like most people don't even know that it still exists. Like it's still on there. I'm surprised Elon hasn't pulled it off yet at this point. Although he does seem to be talking about Bitcoin a little bit more again, just with like one word responses to people's posts about Bitcoin, saying stuff like wild and yeah and wow. But so I don't know, that's always been an interesting. So I am still on X. I know, guys. Yes, what a centralized platform cuckold I am. But I find it interesting with Elon because clearly, like, we know that he has a large bag of Bitcoin. We know that Tesla and SpaceX have Bitcoin in the balance sheet. He, I think, had a dream come true that they've now the Department of Government Efficiency, which is Doge, which is just another way to pump Doge bags. I mean, it's a pretty hilarious troll, honestly. But like, I don't know. I'm curious. It's always been strange to me that he doesn't talk more about it or isn't more vocal about it, because he's obviously a forward-thinking guy. And it's like, if you're talking about like, okay, you're trying to take humanity interplanetary, like, well, what's the natural currency? What's the natural money of a spacefaring species? Like, it's kind of obviously Bitcoin. And I think you can deal with the let's say the delays between planets pretty easily in terms of relaying that data. But I don't know. I didn't even have a question there. It's just more like, it's always surprising to me that he doesn't talk about it more.
So my theory is that everything that and this is just a purely observational thing. Everything that he puts his time and energy into is things that he can have direct control over, right? So like the Doge thing is just, he was able to talk to the devs and have a meeting with the devs, and he was going to like plan the future, and or even the Doge Council. It's like, oh, he gets be involved with like managing the resources of the country, and like he wants to have control. Whereas Bitcoin, like, he can't have control over Bitcoin. He can't come to the devs and tell them to change this or do this or make this optimization. So maybe my theory is that he just doesn't really care about things he can't directly control. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but
I think it's a fairly fair hypothesis. He does seem to like being in control. And I mean, I guess you can't blame him. Clearly his control has worked out very well in the companies that he has worked on. It's pretty interesting to see the saga with OpenAI too kind of playing out in front of us, where he is clearly not so happy with Sam Altman deciding to, okay, we're going to take this nonprofit, basically, we have privatized parts of this nonprofit, which are definitely for profit, and we're raising a shitload of money. And by the way, it's like closed source. And I don't know. Wait, by the way, speaking of AI, is your bot, was it Dave? Was it Dave? It was Dave, right?
Dave,
I mean,
yeah.
Dave who wrote the Nostrich joke originally. Is he still active?
He's not running right now. I could turn him on, but he cost me money, so I don't like to run.
Are you you're using, I assume, OpenAI's API?
Yeah.
That gets really expensive very quickly.
But I realized that a lot of the open source kind of tooling, they have compatible OpenAI APIs. So I'm running an AI model locally, so I could probably switch Dave over to that. It just might make my computer hot the whole day, but it's an option.
Might make it explode, start on fire. But yeah, depends if Dave starts like going out on his own and deciding to answer like absolutely everyone. I don't
exactly.
know.
I just need a throttle on it, like if you need to zap him to talk to him or something.
I mean, honestly, that's a pretty sweet idea. I'm gonna go ahead and say that people would like that quite a bit. Plus, it's like, okay, just like speaking of AI compute, like it makes so much sense to use Bitcoin as a currency for that. Like I know, have you played around with Unleash.chat that NVK built up?
No, not yet. No.
It's pretty nice because you can, first of all, you just pay in Bitcoin. There's like you don't have to, no personal information to sign up. They don't store any of your data. And then you top it up with some Bitcoin, put some sats in there, and you can run any number of models. So like I think that's pretty sweet. And it also just makes a lot more sense when you think about like, okay, if you're paying for AI compute with a credit card that can be, that money is not actually paid to you yet. That can be clawed back, 30, 60 days down the line. Like that really doesn't make a lot of sense when you're talking about actual real world compute. Like that's a pretty dumb way to do things. Like you want final settlement so that you actually have the money paid to you that you're using to fund your compute. It's kind of shocking to me that more folks haven't done that yet. But then again, it's like still like 1% of the world even owns Bitcoin at all. So like we're still early.
Oh yeah. And I want to go back briefly to the we went on a tangent, but this whole work, play, and social.
Thank you for bringing this back. Again, safe space for tangents, but I appreciate you bringing it back.
Because there was one more aspect of that. So we talked about, obviously Damus, we're focusing on microblogging because that was the obvious use case of Nostr. A lot of people associate Nostr with microblogging, but it's just like, that's just such a tiny aspect of it. There's long form, there's like close, like group chat, and there's like all these other things. One aspect is, again, that we talked about, which is gaming. So maybe we start to integrate more things into your profile. Maybe you can actually, have gaming related things attached to your profile. And then after that, it's like, how does Nostr help productivity? How does Nostr help me in my business? We're calling this like Damus Work. Like, what are the Damus Work suite of tools? So a few things I'm working on right now is something called the Notebook. I'm terrible at naming. It's just note prefix with everything. But my idea with Notebook is going to be our mail client. So the idea is that because one way I use Notedeck is, of all these like support tickets coming in, people are like, hey, this is broken. So what I would like to do is I would like to bookmark one of those things, and it gets added to my Notebook. And what's cool about Notebook is kind of like just basically an email inbox. So anytime people post a new thing to the thread, it gets updated, and there's like read and unread states, and like being able to archive a thread when it's done. So it's like a very simple idea, but this could at least help. Like you can imagine one situation where if you on your website you have like a little chat box, and like people are trying to get help on your website, that those notes are getting sent to your relay, and then you have some way to like manage those within your Notebook and see and respond to people and give them help. So like that's just one example of like a tool that people can use. And then obviously the next one would be something like Slack and having like a private relay for your company where you can all communicate. And the coolest thing about this is eventually once we have enough of these tools, then it's going to be such an obvious thing for a company like, oh wait, I can run all this on premises, and I have my own Twitter for my company. I have my own mail client that works really well, and it's all integrated with the calendar stuff. I don't know. So there's like this huge untapped aspect of maybe this could be like how Damus makes money in the future, is maybe selling these tools to businesses. Who knows? But those are the kind of the main three things we're looking at, is the play, work, and social.
I mean, I think that's a cool approach, because again, there are so many things. Like, the focus has been on microblogging, right? How do we build the Twitter-like experience basically for people? Because that's, okay, let's be honest, like that's what's going to attract people into the network to start with. Like they want to socialize, they want to play, they want to have fun. They want to be where their friends are. They want to make new friends, have conversations. But this is ultimately just it's just an open protocol for communication, right? Like that's at its core. It's a really simple way to do that.
Exactly. And we don't have a shitcoin, so how do you attract people? It's like freedom and memes, I guess. It's kind of, so you need some way to spread the message, and a social network is a easy way to do that.
You would think freedom and memes would be enough for people. Like that's enough. That's enough for me, but I guess it is not enough for most people. They, But I'm also I'm very glad that there isn't a shitcoin.
Oh God.
Could you imagine? Like things could have. I mean, thank God that this was like mostly Bitcoin developers building this stuff out, because otherwise, somebody else coming in here, some VC is like, it'd make this a lot better if there was a shitcoin that we could pump and get our own.
That's how
Farcaster
was made. Basically, that's the story of how Farcaster was built.
Have you used it at all?
No, I haven't used it. I just feel like I wouldn't. Maybe this is what other people feel about Nostr when they look in from the outside, but I just don't know if I'd culturally fit in with a bunch of Ethereum people.
That's a different vibe for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of curious as well. Like, okay, so you mentioned just looking outside of the microblogging, kind of some of the things you guys are thinking of. Are there other aspects of the Nostr protocol that you think are kind of untapped right now in terms of the potential? Like you mentioned a little bit long form as well. Long form right now, as you correctly pointed out, it's like you're a little bit limited. Like you need to go to a client that supports you being able to write in long form. Are there, this is the first question, then I've got kind of a follow-up, but are there any mobile clients where you can publish long form events right now, or only read?
So there's one called Yakihane, which is really good.
Yeah.
So I recommend that if you want to try it. There's a Habla News. I used to use that.
Yep.
I think those are web clients. I don't think there's like a dedicated like native writer client. And a lot of these long form clients, they're trying to mix in like social media and stuff. And I'm like, that's the last thing I want if I'm writing something. I almost want like this like blank white room with no distractions. It's just really nice, slick way to just compose notes and markdown. So that's something that maybe that we can look into in the future for adding as another Notedeck app, is like a really just focused writer app for long form, and like a reader app for long form. A dedicated reader app would be pretty cool too.
I want to say that Pablo was building out a dedicated like write only long form, basically workspace. I could be wrong on this because he's building out so many different things at once at any given time. I got to double check, but I swear I remember him mentioning like, oh yeah, I'm building something out that's exactly what you said, like just write only, like there's no other distractions. This is just a place where you go to write. Because I think that is something that like people want. Like you don't want to have all of the extra distractions if you're just trying to get out and write and publish.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to give actually want to demo something, and this is like one of my other favorite protocols that I used to use, and this is maybe like for anyone who's listening, like who any developer who's out there, they want to like try to build this vision. I would love someone to build this. So this is called Gemini. I don't know if you ever heard of Gemini.
I do not think so.
So Gemini is this. It's basically like it's a new type of web, but it's specifically with linked markdown documents. So anytime you click any one of these things, it's kind of like a web browser, but any page you jump to just shows you another markdown. So it's like a long form web browser. Think of like a web browser that you can only read markdown documents, and they're all hyperlinked together. Like we could totally build this on Nostr. Anyway, so I thought I wanted to throw that out there because like this is one example of where it's like it's really hyper focused for one specific use case. And yeah, I don't see why we couldn't build this on Nostr. Anyway, so I just wanted to mention that.
Is this wait, did you say that was its own protocol, or?
Yeah, it's its own protocol. So it's like it uses its own web servers, its own protocol, its own ports, its own data format. and it's really slick. And I always wanted that on Nostr. And like, that's another example of like, we could be building these things that are like more focused. You don't need to put in microblogging and everything just because there's a lot of microblogging content. Like we can have other types of clients, other types of experiences that are just like more standalone.
Well, that's another question I wanted to ask you too, is in terms of this, like the super app versus micro app debate, where do you fall on that?
Yeah. So, and this is again another motivation why I'm taking this browser approach with Notedeck, which is I want all of these apps to exist in like their own tab, right? I want to be able to. So one actually really cool feature of a Nostr browser, and that's something I'm building into Notedeck, which is since you have that local relay embedded within the client, anytime you open up a new app, let's say the notebook app or the visualization app or the or like this app we were just talking about, like the Gemini app, they all can talk to the local relay. So this is already kind of like diverging from the web. The web, it's like you go in your browser, you type in a website, it loads it from some remote server. But this browser, since it has that local relay, all these different apps can all communicate with each other. So if I go into my Columns app and I click bookmark, then I can hop over to my notebook app and I see that bookmark in my notebook. And then I hop over to like my visualization app, I can see all the stuff that's happening sourced from the columns because it's all talking to that local relay. So it's like a new vision for like, it's kind of a super app, but it's also like just a shelf or a Chrome for all these other micro apps that can all talk to each other. And all work offline too, which is like another really cool feature. So this is the vision I'm seeing. And eventually what we're going to do is with those Nostr scripts, we can actually just say, you type in www.bitcoin.com or whatever, and then it loads the Nostr script for that. And maybe it'll load a Nostr app that's like a native Nostr app. It's like not a web app, it's not a browser app, but it's like a native Nostr app that has access to a local database that can do queries locally, has a completely different scripting language. So this is my vision of building like this. It's almost like an operating system for all these Nostr apps that can communicate with each other. And maybe we'll provide a nice, really simple scripting language like Java, something similar to JavaScript, where you can write these apps and you don't have to do all the complicated, you don't have to know about connecting to multiple relays. You don't have to know about outbox model or relay pools because it's really complicated to build a Nostr app these days. But imagine if you could just write one in like 5 lines of code. So that's the long-term goal.
What you're saying is even I could maybe write a Nostr app.
That's the plan. Like maybe there'll be no code solutions where it's just like drag and drop stuff and connect them together and then you have an app.
I mean, that's pretty slick. I would like to be able to do that very much. And I'm curious too, just you had mentioned earlier better tools for creators. Is that something that you guys are thinking about in Damus, or were you speaking kind of more broadly about the Nostr ecosystem in general?
Probably both. We want to get to that. It's just we're obviously very limited. Like I'm building a browser and like an iOS app and a relay, and it's on the list. It's just, and I think it's pretty important for large scale adoption, and we're going to get there. But maybe it's one of those things where it's like if I just build this browser and someone else just makes that creator app and I don't have to do it, that would be ideal.
Yeah. Well, and again, like that's the beauty of I assume what you're building now is also open source.
Mm-hmm. All open source GPL.
I think that's pretty incredible. And I think that it's something that for folks from the outside looking in, they may not, like, it may seem kind of weird. Like, what do you mean you're building this stuff and then you're just like putting it out there for people? Like, what is that? And I don't mean for this to sound like a cheesy question, but like, what does open source mean to you? Like, what is that? Like, why is that so important? Like, what are people missing about that when they see, like, what do you mean you're just giving this away? Like, how do you view this?
Yeah, imagine if someone just gave you like a pill and it's like, I'm not going to tell you what's in the pill, but you should ingest it and it's going to make you like faster and make you feel better. And it's like, I'm like, I'm not going to put that into my body. And I see programs as the same way. If they give you a giant binary, it's like, oh, trust me, this is definitely not going to steal your private key or steal your Bitcoin. But I think open source is pretty important, even just from that basic aspect of trust and openness, is that, running a program on your computer, you need to kind of trust the person if they're writing it, especially for native apps. And I'm building native apps. So that's step one. Another thing is just sourcing help from around the world. A lot of times in open source, someone has a specific niche or itch they need to scratch for their particular use case, and it doesn't make sense for me to work on it. But they can take my code, fork it, and improve it, and then they can contribute back code. So I actually get kind of free labor from the market. It's not always the best quality, but sometimes it is really good quality. And then the third thing, which is you can kind of be a little bit more innovative, because one issue, even like we're talking about OpenAI, is like you're starting to see they're kind of faltering a bit compared to the latest open source models, because you get all this like knowledge from like a lot of it's actually surprisingly coming from China because they don't have any, they don't have like IP restrictions. So they can literally just take all the data and they're not going to get sued, and they train on the data. And a lot of the time you can't do that in North America because of IP law and things like that, copyright law. So you're starting to see like these open source teams who are like contributing these models, and they're like starting to beat like these like closed source commercial models. So there's all these aspects where just openness actually provides a lot more benefits. And the perceived negatives of it are actually not a big deal. If someone able to fork, like with GPL, if someone forks it, they can't close source it for their commercial application. The way that GPL works is that they have to open source their code. And this actually happened, I think, even with Primal, because Primal was, they used some of our GPL code in Damus iOS. And I'm like, wait, make sure you open source it. And they had it open source. I'm like, there you go. Open source is working.
I mean, it's kind of beautiful because, again, it's the old saying, like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like you're opening these things up so that anybody around the world can hack on this, not just whoever's in your localized or closed team. And how can that not, like, it's a free market approach, basically. It's saying like, look, if you can do something better on here, please go ahead and do it, and we'll incorporate that into ours, or you build out your own, like whatever, build the best thing that you can, and whoever builds the best thing is going to win. But we're not going to close off your ability to build just because we're trying to like keep this so close to the chest and keep anyone's eyes from seeing under the hood. Like, it's kind of a beautiful thing.
And like the perfect example of this is Linux. It's like Linux is in every single computing device like on the planet, in your iPhone for the most part. It's a little variation of it on Android phones, like your Mac OS. It kind of like it infects, when things are more open, things can kind of spread and it's easier to hack on them. And like, I didn't ask for permission to build Zaps. I didn't ask for permission from someone to hack on Bitcoin. I just did it. And there's something really profound about that. Like with all these other closed systems and all these other platforms, you have to ask them. Sometimes you have to pay up like $200,000 a month, like on Twitter, just to get API access. And it's like, this free and openness is like allows just hackers and creative people just to contribute and to this amazing, beautiful thing that's kind of, in some sense, it's like blooming, it's blossoming into this this organic thing that's growing, and it's beautiful. And I don't know, you just can't do that with closed system. You just kind of like, you have to call up the CEO like, hey, can I have access to you? Like, no. It's like, okay, buzz off, I'm busy. I'm like, okay, whatever. So that's why I love Bitcoin and Nostr, because it's like you don't have to ask permission, you just start building.
Yeah, and apologize because my dog decided to bark at the moment you were speaking. So he's clearly feeling feisty.
He's hyped.
He's hyped. He loves open source freedom tech. What can I say? He's like, yeah, give me some of that. I'm curious, with where we're at right now with Nostr adoption, what do you think, like, for non-technical people who are loving Nostr, they're loving what developers are building, they're using different clients, they're experimenting, they're trying their best to, let's say, kind of functionally hack on them to, whether they're, throwing out, bug reports. Hopefully they're doing that in a productive way and not just like, hey, Will, this is broken. But like, what's the best way for non-technical folks to help grow Nostr/Nostr, however you would like to pronounce it?
I think the biggest thing is just, producing content important, like onboarding your friends and like trying to explain why it's important, like what do you gain from it? Why are people doing it? That's the biggest thing right now, is that, the retention's so low, and maybe, and even just giving feedback and asking the devs, like, what for your particular use case, what do you need for us to make this thing more successful? Like, we have some basic ideas, but there's a lot of people needing different things, and a lot of people want to build like communities on Nostr, and people are doing that, which is cool. But yeah, just like you just got to keep spreading the word, because I feel like we're definitely losing that battle. It feels like I call it serfdomware, blue sky. Like, we have this amazing free software, and we're losing to these to these horrible solutions that's like locking people in even further, and it's just sad to see. So I don't know if it's like an education issue. It's like maybe it's us need to improve onboarding, but we definitely need to step up and start making a bigger effort into reaching out to different communities that might not be just Bitcoin community people, maybe gamers, maybe gardening, or just start to branch out a bit. I think would be really helpful.
We need more Nostr podcasts, is what I'm hearing. True.
Yes, that would be great.
Luckily, Titcoin is both a Bitcoin and Nostr podcast, so we, I'm doing my part, as the meme would say. I want to be conscious of your time, Will. But one other thing I wanted to just ask, because you've now you've been traveling a lot for Damus, and spreading the good word about Nostr and doing purple pilling in person. You mentioned this experience, which was slightly hampered by QR code issues the other night. But I'm curious, like because I think the pitch is different depending on who you're talking to. Granted, like if you're talking to a creator versus like I don't want to say a consumer because that sounds so legacy, but just a normal user. First, I guess, what's your pitch to just the normal social media user on why they should check out Nostr? And then do you have a different pitch that you kind of throw out towards people that are more content creators?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I've been trying to lean on more recently is like, especially when I've been saying like, oh, it's decentralized. Like no one seems to give a shit about decentralized. So I was trying to approach a different angle, and I did a post this morning, even on the Damus account on Twitter. I'm like, maybe this idea of like, people like to own things, people like to collect things, people like to, so maybe this idea of like owning a place in cyberspace, like something you have control over. I mean, this has always been our slogan with Damus, which is the social network you control. But maybe just like really leaning into that and showing how that's possible and explaining why that's possible without even talking about cryptography, without talking about, because before I'd always go on about, oh, you have your private key and you can sign things and it's super decentralized, and people are just like, what the hell are you talking about? So I've been trying a little bit more subtle approach and say like something you control, because if people ask like, what do you mean by control? It's like, then you can go down that road if you want to. But I think we need like simpler and clearer messaging. And I don't know, I'm still working on that. As a nerd, it's hard for me to do that, but I think that's been kind of my focus lately, is just how to make the message simpler and more clear.
I mean, it is difficult because, again, I think for folks who are on Nostr right now, a lot of us were attracted because this was a decentralized, censorship-resistant protocol for open communication that relies on public private key cryptography and also incorporates Bitcoin. But boy, that pitch is not winning.
It's rough.
Yeah, that's going to get, the 0.001% of people. And granted, like those people are really going to vibe with that message. But for most people, that's just not going to work. And so I think figuring out ways to I don't want to say spin, but it is a spin. It's figuring out, how does this appeal to the normie, the person who's just like, and what do they want? They want a better experience, right? Mm-hmm. They want more flexibility, but they don't want too many choices. They want, like too many choices freak people out. But like you want something that just is going to work. And I think that's, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that people are increasingly, I don't know if this is true, maybe it's just me, but they're increasingly skeptical of kind of like authority and, what do they call it? Institutions. We see that. I feel like almost like this election was an example of that. It's like, and maybe this cautiousness about like having the institutions having too much control over what's getting put into our feeds. Maybe people don't care about that. But that's one aspect of it. So like we can at least sell it like, hey, it's like, you have control over your feeds. But I think it's becoming increasingly harder for us, especially in the world where, Elon's message is like, look, we have free speech on Twitter. So, there's no problem here. And a lot of people are just like, the value proposition is like, well, I already have free speech here. So like, what is like a theoretical free speech increase going to matter that in any practical way? And that's kind of the battle we have to face now with Nostr, is like, okay, what's our message then? It's like, because that was our message. It's like, we have free speech. So we need to show value outside of that and show, so maybe this whole interconnectedness idea, like it's like the social apps protocol that are all interoperable. Like we need to start building those apps and show how they work together. And maybe that, and especially under one brand, like that's what I've been trying to do at Damus, is like, it's hard for me to say, go try this one, go try this one. I don't know if it's going to nuke their contact list, or like go try Primal, have like a different like algo feed experience. I'm just trying to build a suite of tools that, like, if you're familiar with the Damus brand, you can actually just use our really reliable suite of tools that all work together. So that's kind of our approach. But who knows? Like, this is still like, we need to figure out. I think it's been a struggle. We really need to figure out what our message is that we want to send out there.
We need to work, and of course workshop it in the public square, which is Nostr. And I think that I would agree with you on the interoperability piece, because I think that's huge. Even the experience of like the fact that you can now, like, you can highlight something and publish that highlight on Damus like really easily. And if folks haven't tried that, like it's really cool. It's super cool. Like like that. It's those, I think that Nostr enables certain experiences that feel like magic because they aren't available anywhere else. Like they truly feel like holy shit, this is incredible. Or when I publish something, a video on Highlighter, and it's available on Flare and wherever else surfaces video content, that feels like magic. And so I think that magic is part of that value prop of like, look, it's just a better user experience, and it's going to keep getting better. That's the other thing that like I've tried to emphasize to people is like, especially if they got a bad taste in their mouth because they used it a year ago, however long ago, and they're like, oh, it felt clunky. It's like that user experience from the UX, or the UI smoothness keeps improving rapidly.
Yeah.
And that interoperability layer of things just working together seemingly by magic is getting better and better as well at this insanely rapid pace. And I think that's what gives me a lot of hope for the future of this network, is that like the more apps that are built, the more people that are hacking on the Nostr protocol, the better the experience gets for not just people using their client, but for literally everyone, because it all works together. And like, so to me, it's that like Nostr has a special magic. And like that magic is that everything works together. There is no YouTube publishing to YouTube and viewing on YouTube, or publishing on Spotify and viewing on Spotify. All of that is, it's everything everywhere all at once, right? Maybe that's I think that's probably copyrighted because of the movie, but something similar to that is kind of the vibe that I'm going with right now.
Yeah, and we really just got to get them past that friction at the start, which is, I need to put in my private key, or I need to install an extension, or like just get them through the door. Let's figure that out. Let's remove all those obstacles, get them into the door, and then just get them to experience this thing as quickly as possible. And maybe just, it'll take off from there. But that's kind of been the struggle. And this is why the focus on onboarding is so important, at least at Damus HQ, is just getting them in the door, getting them to stay for more than a second is the majority of the battle, really.
Yeah, no, amen. Will, we'll start to wrap up here a little bit, but anywhere you want to, people should go to, you can go to damus.io, you can search Damus on the App Store. If you're not signed up for Damus Purple, you can do that, and you can get early access to Notedeck, which is pretty sweet, and I'm looking forward to playing around with that more. Already enjoying it, and now people have got a little bit of a taste of it. Anywhere else you want to send people, or anything you want to leave folks with before we close out?
Yeah, so if you've listened to this and you agree with any of our vision and you want to make it a reality, obviously Damus Purple it's kind of like the only thing that's kind of keeping us afloat. We have one part-time employee named Daniel, and it kind of covers his wage almost. But if you want to see this keep growing and you want to see us build more cool stuff, yeah, definitely get a Damus Purple subscription. I know it's not a lot right now, but we're going to add more features like the Damus.io links like Primal has. And so yeah, if you want to support us, definitely Damus Purple is the way to go. And then just thank you for supporting everyone who's been supporting us so far at this point. So thanks.
Yeah, and thank you for building open source freedom tech. And I'm going to do my small part. So for anyone who has zapped this stream, I'm going to go ahead and zap these to Damus. Because again, you guys are not, for anyone that's listening, you guys are not VC funded in any way. You are not, no outside investment whatsoever. Like you're just building open source freedom tech and trying to figure out ways to monetize it, which I think is awesome. But also I imagine incredibly stressful and very difficult.
Yeah. And all the zaps go directly to my node right here, my good old trusty node. So there's no middleman. It's directly to, and this is what it should be. This is the vision we're trying to build. It's like support the creators you want to support, go directly into their, value for value. So that's what we want to see more of this, and we're just trying to represent that as much as possible.
I think that's beautiful. And again, this value for value ecosystem is something that is still really new to people, and seems really weird and seems like, okay, that's a nice, cute idea, but is that ever going to actually be, is that going to be meaningful? Is that going to replace, if you're a creator like my YouTube, revenue? Not for me personally, because I don't make like zero on YouTube, so like don't give a fuck. But I think that it's important that people actually try to embrace this ethos. And like, I think what Fountain is doing is really great and has been really great. And they are now a Nostr client as well. Like it's amazing, that's incredible. Yeah. Like that was, I think I was really glad to see that happen, because that's like, that's what this is all about, right? Being able to turn basically any closed system, which is what they had before, into an become a part of an open network. That is incredible. And, anyone can do this too. Like you can make whatever your closed system is. You have some sort of closed social graph. Why not open that up to the entire world? And you can basically only do that with Nostr. Like that's kind of magic.
Yeah, the future is open networks. We have open payment networks. We have open communication networks. I think people not building on those are just going to eventually, just go away. So open is the future.
That's a perfect note to end on. Well, jb55, Wild, Bill, Casarin, thank you for your time here. Thanks to everybody who joined in the live stream too. Again, this show will only be live streamed on Nostr. So if you want to watch it live, as folks have done here, you have to do that on Nostr. So, and shout out to Kieran for building Zap.stream and making this possible. And Kieran, if you're listening to this, please respond to my email and come on the show soon so we can talk about Zap.stream on Zap.stream. It will be super meta. But Will, thanks for your time, man. I'm going to kill this stream now.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for listening. And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. If you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring the Bitcoin Podcast, head to bitcoinpodcast.net/sponsor or send an email to hello@bitcoinpodcast.net. If you are enjoying the Bitcoin Podcast and find it valuable, give it a boost on Fountain, a 5-star review wherever you're listening, or better yet, share this show with your network so more people can learn about Bitcoin. Or don't. Bitcoin doesn't care, but I sure do appreciate it. You can grab links in the show notes to watch or listen to this show wherever you get your podcasts, or go to bitcoinpodcast.net/podcast. And you'll also find the links to follow me and the show on Nostr and on X. Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million, but Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time to listen to the Bitcoin Podcast. Until next time, stay free.